Becky, I think you're running the show tonight.
I think you're right. And we might be a little slim tonight, but that doesn't mean we won't have lively discussion. Robert is on the road. Is on his way home from New Orleans. Jolie is busy. I think she is moving her mom again, which, oh, send out warm, fuzzy thoughts for Jolie because I'm not sure she's having a real good time with that, but that's always challenging. So we hope that a few more people will join in. We usually start just a few minutes after 7 o'clock. Matthew, glad you're here to keep us on the straight and narrow. Things going the way they should be. So we'll get started in just a couple minutes. If anybody has some additional questions that they want to ask, just unmute yourself and speak up, or put them in the chat box. I've got just a couple that we've kind of started on for the discussion, but I don't have very many. But glad to see people here coming in.
Hi there. I can't seem to find the instant message part. So my name is Crystal and I'm a new beekeeper. I went by and looked at my one hive today, and there were a few dead bees at the entrance, and it looked like they were pulling out larvae. What should I be looking for? Is that okay?
Well, that's a good question. It's not uncommon to see some dead bees at the entrance. If it's a concerning amount, make sure that you sweep the entrance clean so that then when you come out the next day, if there's more bees there, you'll know that those are fresh bees. Dr. Judy Wu has a really good little video on doing a dead bee trap that you put in front of your hive that really can give you a very accurate picture of what's going on. A surprising number of bees die every day. The part of that that's a little concerning is pulling out larvae. That's not something we see. That is a hygienic behavior, but generally if larvae is being pulled out, it's because they were sick, dead, or dying. And so that is always concerned. So back to the question that we all ask first is, have you recently treated for mites?
Yes, I did treat for mites. The stick, it was the plastic stick, and I'd have to look at my receipt to tell you what it was, but it was in there for probably 2 weeks.
So not just within the last few days?
Not within the last few days, no. It's been at least 2 weeks, and I did clean the entrance. So yes, I could go back tomorrow and look and see if there's any more dead bees to know if it's a continuing issue.
Something, if it's been within 2 weeks that you treated your bees, I wouldn't expect for them to be still having dead larva issues. That would not be what I would anticipate. Matthew, you got any ideas on this?
Well, Crystal, just so you know, I just happened to walk by one of my hives this evening, and I also knew that I had no dead bees, but I did have 2 dead larvae on the front landing. Now, they were pretty young. They were not older not larvae, but pupa. So
right. I'm sorry. I should have said pupa. They were still in their pupa form.
Yeah, Becky, I was going to ask. I don't necessarily have any ideas. I probably should, but I'm wondering if the time of year and the cold. So, one thing, Crystal, that kind of comes to mind is, obviously the temperatures, here I'm south of Kansas City, dropped into the 30s here the other night. What's your bee population like? If they can't keep the brood warm and that pupa dies off, they will pull it out. So one thought might be that if you had a low population if you had like a lot of brood for some reason, but a small number of bees and they couldn't keep it all warm, they might pull some of those pupa out that had died because they couldn't keep it warm.
Okay.
Have you done when you did your mite treatment, did you do a colony inspection? Did you open it up at all? Was there?
I started with the brood box because again, I'm new and I heard that, as you go further deeper down, they get more mad. So we started with the brood box and everything in there looked fine. I didn't see anything unusual. I do think I saw some drone cells, but I didn't really do anything with them because I figured they would run their course. So I've got the brood box and then one medium super worth of honey. Say that again.
How many frames of bees, if you were just to estimate, when you opened up the brood box or when you saw the brood box, how many frames were just full of bees? Just looking down.
I would say at least 8.
Oh, okay. So it seems to be well populated.
Yeah, in the brood box. Now that was a couple weeks ago. Now today when I looked at him, I only looked at the top super and I took a picture so I can look and see if I can figure out that count. But yeah, I would say that they're within, like the last 2 on the outside are not covered in bees, but all of them in the middle are.
Okay.
I wonder if I shouldn't, because I haven't really done anything to like insulate them. Maybe I should put something on the north side to make sure that they don't have that wind coming in.
Yeah, you'll typically hear in the Midwest, we don't need to insulate, particularly if you have a good population of bees, which it sounds like you do. That insulation shouldn't be required. It's a choice. 90% of, I think, the beekeepers in the Midwest here do not insulate.
Okay.
And so it's certainly not a requirement, and I don't think it's causing you any troubles.
Okay. Well, I'm going into my first winter and I'm a little nervous, so I'll check
good luck.
them. I'll check them tomorrow and I'll post questions if I have more. Thank you.
Thanks for speaking up, Crystal. Cheryl added to the chat box chilled brood, which is kind of what Matthew was talking about. If it is not something I would expect necessarily now. Usually you will see chilled brood when you've had a big spring buildup and then all of a sudden, like out of the blue, you have a really cold shift. And so your population hasn't kept pace with the brood that was grown, and so you'll have that kind of chilled brood thing happen then. Not to say that it wouldn't, but that is a possibility. Susan Lane has also put in here to put up a north wind that we all do a north wind break if we can. That's really more important than any other kind of insulation. When you insulate a hive, if you really are putting like one of those insulating blankets on it that you'll see in the bee companies, that you can just trap so much moisture in there that you have to be very careful with ventilation there. Josh Henry has listed, he said, I recently learned of the smartphone app called Bee Health Guru that essentially uses your phone's microphone to diagnose common issues such as hive beetles, varroa infestation, and a queenless colony. Does anyone use this, and how reliable do you think it is? Before I say bad things, is anybody using this so that I won't embarrass myself a whole lot? No, nobody's using this. Josh, I don't know anything about this. Maybe this is something that is a marvelous new invention, but I would say that the only way that it's going to pick up something like a hive beetle problem or a varroa infestation is if your hive is dead and there is no noise coming from it. I'm sorry, that's not very nice of me, is it? I don't know. We'll see what happens. I don't know.
I'm aware of some other Hive monitors that do have sound built in, or sound measuring devices. There's been some studies that that talk about the frequency that the bees generate can indicate certain type of events. Usually it's related more to swarming and things like that.
Yeah.
And I've seen pictures of people sticking their cell phones in the front entrance, which is a guaranteed way to get the bees to come out and pay attention to you. And I'm a technology guy and I've not used that. I would think that in order for it to even be effective, you would have to leave it in there for a period of time. I can't see, other than being queenless. I mean, I know hives get a little noisy when they're queenless. I don't really see how, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's some studies out there, but I think to be effective, you'd have to leave it in there more than just a few minutes.
Well, and that's a great point, because just us disrupting the hive changes everything about the hive. When as soon as you pop the lid, you have disrupted it, and you have noise changes. So I agree with you. It sounds like something you might have to leave your phone in there for a period of time to actually get that. Yes, if they were saying that they were going to identify swarm behavior, even to some extent queenless behavior, I've heard a lot of people talk about that. That would be, I think, more reasonable, but I'm not sure about small hive.
Yeah, Joshua, if I find the paper on the frequency of the bees and some studies, I'll post that in the NECBA group just for reference. But yeah, because I have read a couple of studies on that. But yeah, I think it's like people that say their hives don't swarm. I don't believe that, because you just hadn't happened to be standing by the hive when it swarmed, and it's such a quick event. Hive will swarm in 10 minutes and you wouldn't even know it happened. So I think sticking your phone in the front entrance for 30 seconds is probably not going to be terribly useful. Could be wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm a technology guy, so don't get me wrong.
Yeah. Well, and Travis has posted in the chat room as well that he tried it and he didn't find it very helpful, very useful, but keep us posted. Maybe you're on something new here. So
I think it's interesting. Like I said, there's I'm trying to think. Broodminder doesn't have it. Buzzbox, I think, has an in-hive temperature, humidity, and sound. There's a company out of Europe that has one. I think over time it would be, if you're tracking the noise level over time, I think it could certainly indicate certain things such as swarming and dead hive. But yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of mean, but yes, I think so. So keep us posted. Let us know. Jane says, I think it was a program out of Oklahoma. So we will not say disparaging things about Oklahoma, but that we'll see what happens. Maybe there's some new technology coming down the pike there. So Paul is written in the chat box. He says, on doing an oxalic acid dribble, OA dribble, remind me of whether the amount dribbled is per hive or per box and 2 boxes. As I recall, it was 5 milliliters per seam. And yes, that is correct. And there is a maximum amount per box. Matthew, do you remember what it is for the OA dribble? If not, I'll have to look that up while we talk about something else.
Yeah, I don't, because I don't do the dribble. I do the vaporization. So I was hoping you would know that answer off the top of your head, since I think you're a dribbler.
Yeah, I am. Well, I am a dribbler, but
okay. Susan says 50 milliliters per box. That's kind of what I recall as well.
Okay, thank you. That seems that seems like the answer. And
which is the math. Now, Susan, is that per? So that's per box. So if it's a double deep, then it's 100 milliliters for each box.
I don't think you'll ever have that many bees in your box. That would mean that you had 20 covered frames.
Well, that's true.
So I think you're supposed to, I think it's like 50 milliliters is what you're supposed to do. They made a lot of talk about the biggest thing is make sure that your recipe is mixed correctly. And then if you're a little more or a little less, that's not as important as that you have the correct mixture that you're putting on there. Thanks, Susan, for chiming in on that. I'm pretty sure that's.
And Becky, isn't it also the recommendation with the dribble method that you're feeding sugar syrup? so that they're less inclined to eat the dribble?
I just read that the other day, and that you're putting in such a small amount that I don't think they're particularly concerned about whether they consume it or not. That yes, if they consumed a lot of the oxalic acid, that it wouldn't be good for them, but that small amount is really not going to affect their overall health.
Okay.
But you know, feeding them, then they aren't as likely to eat it. But I know that you want them grooming it, licking it off. That's part of the getting rid of the mites, so that they're doing some grooming while that's going on. So Ray and Donna have asked along this line, is it too late to treat now? So what's the alternative? If you choose not to treat, then are you worried about wasting money or ineffective? If it's ineffective, is it less ineffective than not treating? So my answer is no, it's not too late to treat now. Now, will you have good effective treatment if you treat now and you haven't already treated once? Your bees aren't going to have time to build that population that you really want them to build. And so that's the concern, not that you won't get a knockdown on your mites, but that they won't have that time to build up with good mite numbers, with low mite numbers. So that's the worry. We're getting ready to do our final oxalic acid treatment. Matthew was talking about vaporization, and I want him to talk some more about that later. But whatever you do, we always do, whatever treatment you use, no matter what has gone on before, in November, we do a final mite treatment with oxalic acid. We've done this for quite a number of years. Dr. Ellis was doing this research probably almost 20 years ago, and we've been doing it just about every year. And so in November, we do the dribble, oxalic acid dribble. It's just what we've always done. The vaporization is excellent too, and it will knock off, it just cleans up your hive. It's just a final cleanup, and that will take you into spring with very, very good mite numbers, maybe non-existent mite numbers. So not treating now doesn't.
I would question, Ray, Donna, and you can put it in the message. Have you already treated earlier in the year and you're just wanting to maybe do another treatment, or have you not treated at all?
Either way, I don't think it makes any
Right.
difference if he's treating now. It's just going to be how effective would your treatment be?
Right.
Now, it also is what treatment. If you're saying right now, can I use one of those treatments that has a really narrow temperature range? Probably not. And Ray and Donna are saying they treated in May. I would say that you need to look at your mite numbers, and you're going to definitely need to treat this fall. And if you'll have to be selective on your treatment, but you're almost out of brood now. We don't have much brood in our hives. There's still some, but not much. But you can do another oxalic acid treatment now because the brood is so low. It would be a very effective treatment. At least that's my take. What do you think, Matthew?
Yeah, agreed. Where I was kind of going with this is that the bees that are in your colony now are probably already what we call the winter bees.
Mm-hmm.
And so they've already, if you have a high mite level, yeah, you can treat. I think I'm kind of with you, Becky. You can treat, it'll knock those mites off. You don't know quite what damage has been done to those bees yet. And to your point that, most of our colonies are near or at broodless, which is a good time to treat. A lot of people will pick a really nice warm day in December to do a vaporization treatment just to kind of knock the last few mites off going into spring. So I agree. It's not too late to treat, and you probably should treat if you haven't since May. I would tell you to put on and this is what I do, is put on your calendar for next year, after you pull honey supers, August, September, start your mite treatments. and get those mites knocked down before your winter bees are being made, however you want to put that.
You need those healthy brood cycles, that's for sure. So I just have the Honeybee Health Coalition guide is here. I was looking at it for something else. And with the Mite Away Quick Strips, which is a really effective treatment and one that we have trouble with because the temperatures are so high.
I think you guys can eat that.
What it really is that their temperature range is so narrow. It says use when outside day temperatures are 50 to 92. So we've already passed the opportunity to use that because our day temperatures are just barely up into approaching 50. And this next week, we're going to have several days where they won't get up to 50. But there are still some treatments you could use besides oxalic acid, but now is really the time to use that. So good opportunity. Mike has mentioned that as well. Next week is in the 60s. So here in Eastern Kansas, so it's certainly treating is a possibility. Good additions, guys. Ray and Donna have gone on to say we also had a significant small hive beetle problem in August and September, which is why we missed the Varroa treatment. Yikes. Oh, that so yeah, I'm not a small hive beetle expert. We have very, very little problem with small hive beetle. It's always that secondary predator that you kind of go, okay, what else is going on in that hive? And so I hope it wasn't that your beetle numbers were really high because your population had dwindled because of mites. So it could be this and this and this, and it's kind of snowballing on you. So we'll have to see what it is. I hope, good luck. Hope that's it. So other questions? Oh, Matthew, let's go to your question that you posed on our website earlier this week. And can you label your honey organic if you don't use any treatment that is a non-organic treatment? What was the outcome of your talk? I haven't looked at that in a day or two, Matthew. What did they say?
So, it's an interesting topic. It's a topic that came up as part of a beekeeping study group that I'm a part of. And basically the three questions is what is organic honey? How do you certify organic honey? And then how do you defend your honey against, an organic standard? So just strictly legally speaking, not philosophically, whether your honey is organic or not, legally, you cannot label your honey organic unless you've gone through the USDA's organic certification process. That's the sort of the legal note. There's an exception. Someone commented that if you produce less than $5,000 per year, you're exempt from applying for organic certification, but you still have to meet the standards, which involves record keeping and things like that. Basically, when it boils down to is legally, you would never be able to get your honey certified organic in the United States as a U.S. beekeeper. Now, what you will see in all the grocery stores and Walmart is you'll see a lot of honey labeled as USDA organic. And the reason is because the USDA recognizes other countries' organic certification. So in most cases, for example, Brazil is where you will see a lot of that. If Brazil certifies someone's honey as organic, the USDA will then allow them for that honey to be imported and put on the shelves and displayed with a USDA organic label. You decide whether you feel like foreign countries have the same standards that we do, but what you will see on the shelves, if you look on any imported honey, will also have to have a country of origin. So when you look at that honey, it's usually going to be from Brazil or some other South American country. Now, philosophically, that's a different story. If you want to just sort of ignore kind of the law of labeling your honey organic or not, there's certainly, we all know we can't control where our bees fly. I mean, they'll forage, at least 2 miles, if not further, depending upon where what part of the country you're in, or what part of, what part of the geographical area you're in. You can't control what your neighbors spray on their flowers, or what the soybean farmer across the street from me sprays on his soybeans, things like that. So it's an interesting discussion. I don't frankly see a lot of people labeling, at least in here in the Midwest. I've seen a few Facebook posts, but I don't see a lot of people claiming that their honey is organic. Claiming it's raw and unfiltered and unheated is a whole different thing. But organic, I don't see that often. It was just an interesting topic.
I have seen a few people label their honey as organic, and there's usually 5 beekeepers there to jump on them and pummel them with a honey dipper if they try to do that. It does feel like we are penalized for being United States beekeepers, that it's like we fall under a different category. And so I think it becomes all of our jobs then to educate the public. So when they see organic honey in Sam's Market, what does that say? And when it says USDA organic, what are they buying, and what it is? It's a hard, steep road to get people to understand what that means and what they're getting. The adulteration of the honey. I read recently that the popularity and the notoriety around Manuka honey that comes out of Australia, New Zealand, that part of the world, made from the eucalyptus blossom, that they only export about twice the Manuka honey that they could possibly produce. So how does that they can export twice what their possible production is, how does that work? Well, I think it works a lot like USDA organic. I think it's just about the same kind of thing, that there's a lot of mislabeling and a lot of misinformation. And so kind of frustrating for those of us who try to follow the rules. So
yeah, and I think the Facebook thread actually was very positive. I think most people agreed that we really can't necessarily label it organic, but educating the consumer is our best method.
That's because the people on our Facebook page are educated. They know. They're educated. They got it. So you guys are good. Okay. Well, thank you for posting that one, Matthew. I thought it was a great conversation starter.
Oh, I have a whole list of other ones I'll post once that one blows over.
Oh, very good. Well, and then, truly that the raw piece of it now is one that will certainly mushroom and become a big deal, because I've heard people espouse that if you used a heated uncapping knife, that you cannot call your honey raw honey because you added heat to it. Okay, I'm not gonna win. Yeah, not
well, a lot of us buy waxed foundations from Man Lake and Dadant, and it's come pre-waxed, and we don't know the source of that wax, and there's that seems to be a pretty common thing, that chances are that wax has had some sort of chemical in it. Now, to what level of chemical is contained within that is probably questionable or debatable. And a lot of us, if you your wax often, if you have 10-year-old comb, chances are there's a fair amount of various chemicals, either chemicals that the bees picked up or chemicals that as a beekeeper have put into the hive over the course of the years. So
Dr. Judy Wu Smart up in Nebraska I think that was her doctoral thesis, and she looked at chemicals in beeswax. And if you have a chance to hear her talk about that, it's a pretty deep talk, lots of science in that, lots of chemistry, but it's a fascinating talk too. So let's see. Holly's asking, and we got a new question in the chat box. It says, what if I have a hive that needs to be relocated on my property facing north? When is a good time to move it, and how? So because the hive is facing north now, you want to move it so that it's not facing north? Is that what you're asking? Or
Or do you also need to move it a distance from where it currently is, Holly?
good ending? Yeah. Correct. Okay. So mostly,
Correct which one?
yeah, all of the above. If you were just moving it so it isn't face north, you can just rotate it. I mean, set it in place and like turn it like a clock face to where it's the direction you want it to be. Um, a little bit at a day. The bees will find the entrance for that. They will do that. You can move a beehive any time of the year except when it is so cold that they are tightly clustered. So that means anything below about 40 degrees, you don't want to move them. If that cluster breaks and it's below 40 degrees, they may not be able to climb back up and recluster. And that's a big important piece of that. So just for like they are facing north and I want them to face south, so I'm going to maybe turn them an eighth turn until they're facing the direction I want them. I would turn them a little bit every 2 or 3 days. You could also just put up a windbreak north of them. Oh, now you've added, I would like to move them about 25 feet. So this was a swarm. Oh, very good. So do you have a wagon? You could put them on a wagon and just move them just like 2 feet or 2 miles, and it's a great time of year to do that. But you can move them on a wagon or something. So if that would work for you, Matthew, how do you move hives?
So yeah, so as you know, we actually did an
Oh, yes.
unscientific we did an unscientific study on this. The rule is 2 feet or 2 miles. I think that's sort of a common beekeeping lore thing that you'll hear all the time. Something that you hear a lot on the internet is, well, just move them as far as you want and stuff some grass or throw some branches in front of the entrance. It's something I'd always heard as long as I was a beekeeper. You know, Becky heard that and she called poo poo on it. And so we did a study for a master beekeeping class this summer. The 3 beekeepers, one in Kentucky, myself, and then one in Las Vegas, and basically kind of confirmed that blocking the entrance or obscuring the entrance has some effect, but not a positive one, or not, I mean, it has a positive effect, but it's very, very minuscule. So to answer your question, yes, put it in a wagon or some sort of movable device, and then just move it a foot or two every day. And with 25 feet, you're only talking, 10 days or something. This time of year, there's not a lot of foraging going on. So if there's, a series of days where it looks like it's going to be fairly cold, that can kind of help. But yes, I would just pick it up, set it on a dolly or something, and just move it a couple of feet a day.
I would concur with that. I've never had any trouble moving hives 2 feet a day.
Yeah, and Becky, I did exactly what you said last year on a hive that I had facing north. Is I just every day just went out and just rotated it 2 or 3 inches over the course of a couple of weeks until it was facing south. So that
Yeah.
works very well.
They will be able to scent that far. They will be able to find the hive because of hive pheromones. So not a big problem. Good question. And this is the time of year to do that kind of evaluation. I want to do that. You can also move hives a distance. Cool day, the field force will be home, not cold, but cool. You can stuff the entrance, pick them up, move them, and you won't have that fear of overheating. You do something like that on a 90-degree day and start moving them around, you can have bees die pretty easily. They overheat quick. So not a bad time at all. So if you kind of go, no, I didn't like this place for the bees. We had to deal with fences. We had to deal with gates. We had to deal with whatever. Now might be a time to reconsider that. So it's a good option. So, okay. Let's see, how often should you check your hive during the winter? Someone asked that on another site, kind of like they're already into winter mode. They're past the I'm feeding them, I'm doing whatever. Just how often do I need to check them this winter? So Matthew, what do you think on that one? How often do you check yours over the winter?
Opening them up, you certainly, hopefully you've built them up going into winter, that you have 50, 60, 70 pounds of honey sitting on top box. Colony's good, population's good, you've treated for mites. You really don't need to check them. The recommendation would be to do the heft test, where, and be good time to do it now is go out and lift up the back of the hive and just kind of see how heavy it is. And then throughout the winter, just kind of go out there every now and then and just lift up the back of the hive and see how they're doing on stores. Most of the colony deaths will actually occur closer to, the February, March timeframe. The early winter is not so much of a problem if they have good stores, but as they move up throughout the winter and consume a lot of the, what they've stored, you start, February, March is when you really need to start paying attention. I wouldn't recommend opening up the hive, through just, November, December, January. There's probably there's nothing that you're going to do that time of year anyway to have a positive outcome. And really all you're doing is breaking the seal on everything. Now, if you get into January, February, and you pick up the back of the hive and it almost tips forward because it's so light, now you're going to have to start evaluating your emergency feed operation. What are you going to do to provide them some emergency food?
Because of Marty, I'm going to ask you to weigh in on this. When you talked about wintering at our last meeting, so if you'd like to contribute to this, I'd love to have your comments. When your bees are working through their winter feed, they almost always are working up in your colony. So if you do lift that outer cover, and right there you can see that you have bees clustered right up next to your inner cover, that's where your cluster is, you may be pretty low on feed, whether you're hefting it and feel like that or not. So it might be then to try to find a warmer day to move some frames over from the outside over closer to the cluster, or to add some of that supplemental solid feed. That's a sign those bees have worked up. And if they're right under the inner cover, that's a time when maybe your bees have used through their food. So Marty, what do you say about how?
I agree with you on that. The big thing is when your bees have moved up to the top and they may be out of feed, they're hopefully you've got feed, got frames on the outer edges that are still haven't been touched, and that would be a good 60-degree day or something like that. You can move the frames in and get them up closer, at least so they can get to it. And again, like you said, solid feed. Your liquid feeds are going to be obsolete here shortly because your sugar water because of the cold coming in. But any warm time, if they start moving around, they'll actually go feed out of a liquid feeder, but it's not very likely it'll happen. So, but as far as the solid feed, use your sugar boards or your even if you're in a situation where you need to do something, you use dry sugar, whatever, just a bag with slits cut in it with dry sugar in there will work too. So, but mainly, try to get the feed next to them, if they're up on top, that's for sure.
So Marcia's asking a question that's related to that on emergency food. I have a couple of frames of honey saved from a dead out from last February. When and where do I add the frames? Best use of a dead out hive, salvaging that, and you will only have that if you got into that dead out in a timely manner to remove the food, to save the food. So 2 thumbs up on that, Marcia. You can add it to the hive at any time. If you got into your hive right now and you had a frame or two that was not drawn out or not full, or that was just kind of there along the edge, you could put that food in there at this time. But any day that your temperature is above 50, you will have bees flying and you can open a hive. Now, I wouldn't do the full out on inspection. I'm not pulling out a bunch of frames, but you can look down in and you can see what they have. And if this is empty, take that one out, put your full one in. Anytime I'm adding a food frame like that, or as Marty suggested, moving food frames, I kind of look at where they're clustered, where the massive amounts of bees are, and I try to put it in pretty close to beside them. That's, yeah. You hate
On
to
the dead out,
die, but good. Yeah.
on the
Good.
dead out, was that something from just the bees swarmed out or dead out, or is it something, a disease or something like that? Maybe
Good
you might
point.
want to make sure. You might want to
No,
make sure you
it was-
froze the frames or stuff.
Yeah, it wasn't a dead out. It was in that February deep freeze that we had for 3 weeks up here, and my cluster was just too small.
Okay.
So they didn't make it, and they left quite a bit of honey in there. So I closed it as soon as I figured out that had happened. I locked it up and waited till I had some time to get out there. But I had made sure the entrance was closed up so nothing else could get in there. And I mean the frames were definitely frozen, if y'all remember last February.
Yeah. All right. I agree.
Marty's point is correct. If you have a hive that dies for suspicious reasons, then, moving that around, you could spread some disease, but good job. I think that's exactly right. And add it whenever you can. And that's, if you've got your frames in your freezer, I would let them thaw to like room temperature before I go throw them in the hive right next to your bees. That would kind of be mean to kind of like putting cold feet on somebody in bed. That's just not a nice thing to do. But other than that, I think that would be a great addition.
I'd like to highlight what Becky something that Becky is saying is put it on the side of the cluster. Don't put it in the middle of the cluster.
Yes.
The bees actually, when they cluster, they will actually stick their heads in the cells on either side of the frame to form the cluster. If there's a honey barrier in the middle of the cluster, you've split the cluster in half basically at that point. So make sure you place it along the edge of the cluster or wherever they're clustered at.
Good clarification, Matt. Good job.
And yes, and Becky, I will also comment, I put a frozen frame of honey in my observation hive and it drove all the bees to the very top of the hive.
You big meanie.
Even after sitting out for an hour, it was still not warm enough for them. It really freaked them out when I put it in there.
I bet it did.
In early winter, typically I've used a thermal imaging camera to see where the brood is, or not brood, but the cluster is. And then I can, week after week, I never have to open the hive. When it starts getting really to the high or up high is when you have to worry about feeding it. And that's usually not till February, March. But early on in the winter, I try not to open the hive any more than I absolutely have to. And I do it through the image. It's amazing what you see with the thermal imaging camera. And they have some apps that go on phones and stuff that are really pretty cheap. So if that's something of interest, look it up or call me and I'm glad to talk you through it.
Here's one a question in the chat box that I'm not really familiar with. So I hope somebody else here is. David Williams is saying, what's the opinion on the difference between adding a quilt box or just tilting the hive a little more forward to force condensation to roll to the front of the hive? Therefore, it is not raining on the bees, because if that condensation rains down on the bees, then it freezes. You have little bee popsicles and then you have dead bees. So I haven't used quilt boxes, but I think they're an intriguing idea. We usually work pretty hard to make sure that we have some decent ventilation. Matthew, anybody, Ed, have you guys? I saw
Yeah, I've used quilt boxes before. I like.
Tell us about them.
Well, I prefer insulation, and where I have insulation, I don't really have an issue with condensation, but I've done both insulation and, but when I haven't had the insulation and I use the quilt boxes, I haven't had any problem with the raining. So either one or both, actually both isn't necessary. If you've insulated, you're not going to have the condensation you will. And so then your ventilation is really important. Whereas you look in a regular tree, there's no ventilation, you know. And so insulation is the key for that, because typically in a tree, you have 3 to 6 inches of wood completely around the hive. And so it's the equivalent of, say, an R10 insulating factor. I'm done.
Okay, well, and of course, trees can vary. Some trees have quite a few cracks in them, and you can have some chance for ventilation. But I think the quilt boxes look like a good solution. I think they really do. So we have a couple feeding questions, and in fact, we've got about 3 liquid feed questions. It starts with, is it too late to feed sugar water? And the answer is no, that you can feed the 2-to-1 sugar water now. They will continue to take liquid feed as long as day temperatures get up to around 50 degrees. And honestly, if you're using an internal feeder that's a contact feeder right above the cluster, right at the above the top bars, they will take that feed a very long time if they need it. I need to share a screen, and let me see if I can figure out how to do this. Oh, never mind. I'm gonna have to hang on. I want to do. I got to find my picture first. Oh, I'm sorry. I had this and then I've lost it. Nope. Jay, it's your picture. Do you have your picture handy? Maybe you could find it faster than I can. I put it on my desktop, and now I can't find it. There it is. Okay, I opened it. Now I'll screen share, and it should let me do it. Okay, can you guys see this? Yes, no, maybe?
Yes, we see it.
Yep.
Very good. Thank you. This is from Jay Francis. And Jay said that he says, how come it did this? How come my...
Did we do this in grade school where you'd hang a string and a glass of sugar water across with the toothpick across the top and make little sugar crystals?
Jay, if you're not laughing right now, I don't know what, because I told him the exact same thing. We made rock candy when we were kids, and you do a saturated sugar solution, and this is what you get. And he said that his bees, he said, this is the lid. So he thought it was weird because they weren't drinking much syrup. No, they wouldn't be drinking much syrup when it's like that, that's for sure. So why does this happen? What's going on here? So I'm going to quit sharing now so that we can go back to the regular screen. So Jay said Jay says he has a terrible internet connection, so he emails me earlier in the day. He said he did not boil the syrup, that it was fresh, fairly fresh syrup. He said this happened fairly quickly. Hand washes all of his jars, and so he doesn't feel like it's a contamination issue or anything like that. But what can you do to prevent it? And he asked about vinegar. Vinegar will help prevent molding, but I don't think it will do anything for the crystallization rate. Anybody have a comment on that?
Yeah, initial heat is the primary issue here. If you don't get it hot enough to really get it truly in solution, you're going to have that kind of problem. When I heated it higher initially, I never had that problem with it sugaring out like that, crystalline out like that. But if I don't get it hot enough, I can have that problem very easily.
Did he say how long it took for that to happen?
He did not. Let's see.
It
Jay's-
happens pretty fast. You know, you just pull it back out, put it back in and reheat it till you get it to where it's good and hot and it dissolves, then it should be okay. But if you don't get it hot enough initially, you're going to have a problem with that.
Let's see, I'm trying to read. Okay, Jay, I think that's probably the answer. If crystals grow on crystals, I suppose that if you started and you left some sugar crystals in there, that might have contributed to that crystallization effect. Oh, Jay says it happened within a week. So I would guess that might be it, Jay, is that it was, you can try that. I don't know. You know what you did. We have had the same thing happen. And so it's just pretty much as natural as honey crystallizing. Okay. Let's see. Paul had a couple more questions about feeding. He says, I started feeding and now it looks good. However, an adjacent hive has what is called fair stores. Just okay. Start feeding that hive and discontinue the first one. You know what? As long as they'll take it and you have need, I don't think it makes any difference. I think you could feed one or both. And when they're done, and they'll let you know. Andrea is asking about some more about ventilating hives. And she says, if your inner cover does not have a notch in it, you might want to add one. We sometimes even put like a little popsicle stick, something like that, and under the telescoping lid to create a little bit of circulation. But you know what? The bees, there is some opportunity for ventilation there. Sometimes when we put in those kind of ventilation things, the bees will propolize it shut. So they kind of control what they want to in there. But don't wrap in plastic. Don't do anything that's going to decrease that, because you're preventing your bees from being ventilated enough. That's an issue. So
Jay made the question about going back to that sugar crystallization. Jay said that he said, did he not? He heard that he wasn't supposed to boil the syrup. When I make my sugar water, I don't boil it. I bring my water to a boil, almost to a boil, not just where it's starting to get bubbles come off the bottom of the pan, and it's just starting to get that temperature. Then I pour my sugar in and stir it, and that cools it down enough, and then you can put it in your bottles right away. So you're not really boiling it, the syrup. You're just bringing the water to an almost boil, and then it'll make a syrup. Then it won't crystallize after that. But it does. You want to keep it cool enough that when you put it into, like I store mine in gallon water bottles, the Nestle water bottles and different brands. Some of those water bottles you got to be careful on because they melt.
oh,
They don't really fall, don't leak, but they shrink down or change shape or whatever because if the syrup is that hot. But you got to be careful. But just FYI.
yeah, I hear you. I hear you. We've had good discussion tonight. Thank you. Good questions. We're kind of almost to the end of our hour, but if somebody has one, don't hesitate to write in or speak up and let us know if you think of another question here. I wanted to remind everyone that this coming weekend, Friday, Saturday, we'll have the Kansas Honey Producers meeting in Salina, Kansas. It's a 2-day meeting. You can come for both days. You can come for one day. There are pricing for both. You can register online. It's a different feel to a meeting because we share meals. We have full days. Our guest speakers are Randall Cass, who is the Iowa Extension Apiary Specialist. I probably mangled his title, but man, he is great with really what's working in beehives. He is an active beekeeper, and his information about beekeeping is hands-on. It's what you should be doing in the hives. He's very, very knowledgeable. The other speaker is Dr. Cameron Jack. He is from the University of Florida. He got his PhD under Jamie Ellis, not sure which way that works, University of Florida, and just has written some really interesting things. I am excited to hear both of them speak. And then we have a plethora of other speakers, local talent. I know that Sharon Rowan is going to talk about value-added products and how to develop a product. And if you make killer honey barbecue sauce and you want to market it, she will tell you how that you will go about doing that. So just a very diverse program. The state of Kansas is going to come and talk about packaging, and we've had some questions about that in the past. So I really hope you guys will think about it, because, or not just think about it, I hope you'll come, because it is our first in-person meeting in 20 months. And I think that we're all going to try to be very, very safe, even though we're meeting in person. So the hotel has some requirements, and we're going to try to abide by what the hotel wants us to do and to keep each other safe while we do that. But please, if you have questions, let us know about it. Ask them now. We'd be happy to talk about the Kansas Honey Producers meeting. The Kansas Honey Producer serves all the beekeepers in Kansas. We try to promote programs, education, and support the industry for all beekeepers. It's not commercial beekeepers, it's not hobby beekeepers, it is all beekeepers. And I think one of the most fascinating things is being able to talk with people who are at all different levels of beekeeping experience, from people who are making a living with it, from on down to people who are just brand new. Everybody's welcome, so it's a good thing. This next NEKBA meeting, we have guest speakers, our scholarship kids, which is always fun. They're going to do little presentations about what they found out their first year of beekeeping. And Joe Patrick is going to talk about, I think, collecting seeds. Joe, I think you were on here earlier. Are you still on? Would you like to give us a little preview?
Yeah, yes, I'm going to be talking about seed saving and how to store those seeds, and a little bit of identification too on a few select late bloomers.
Cool, very cool. So should we
I'm sorry. One other thing not to forget is this is our election meeting.
Oh, yeah.
So we're gonna be voting on the election officers, and so that's important. So we want to get as many people out physically to the meeting as we can.
It's an important meeting. Joe, somebody talked to me recently, or I saw an article about cold starting seeds, like seeds that are perennials for this part of the world, that you can start them in little plastic containers in late winter. Just basically put some potting soil down, put a little cap on them, and put them outside. Have you done that?
Yes, every year.
Every year. Well,
if they're perennials or natives, I start my seeds outdoors, and I put them in little seed starting pots and so forth. And then I put them in a clear type of trash bag. I use seed trays like you can buy at GrassPad and a few other places. And after the first of the year, I start them and I put them outside and let nature take its course.
I hope you'll talk about that just a little bit. I don't know where I've been that I hadn't really heard about that before, but I have quite a few natives now, or perennial kind of plants that I'd like to start some this spring. So I'm anxious to try that.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll include a little bit of that then.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Well, I'm
Sure.
excited. That's this month. I think it's about the November 15th that we'll be getting together for the Northeast group, Kansas Honey Producers, Northeast group. Matthew's answered another question. You can add your quilt box anytime you'd like. And that's the truth. You can do that. There you go. Anything else for the good of the cause? We're at 8 o'clock exactly. I saw that Robert was on. He was traveling, so I didn't holler at him, but thank you for joining us, Robert. And lots of people here. Thank you for tuning in tonight. Appreciate it.